The automatic doors of Anchorage Regional slid apart with a sharp metallic gasp, cutting through the snowy morning calm like a scalpel. Nurses froze mid-stride. A doctor stopped speaking mid-sentence. Even the heart monitors seemed to hesitate. Then the figure emerged from the blizzard. A German shepherd, 5 years old, black and tan fur soaked and clinging to his trembling frame, staggered inside, each step leaving a smear of blood across the polished floor. His paws were torn open, raw from miles of ice and gravel. His harness read, "Service dog, do not pet," but no one moved to touch him. Because it wasn't the dog that stopped the ER cold. It was what lay across his back. A little girl, 7 years old, blonde hair matted with snow and blood, hung limp over the dog's shoulders. Her pediatric sweater was ripped, her skin blue from the cold, one shoe missing. Her hands dangled lifelessly, swaying with every unsteady step he took. Shadow's muscles quivered under her weight, but he didn't falter. His ears pinned back, his amber eyes locked on the trauma bay doors with a desperate, unbreakable focus. No leash, no owner, no sound except the soft drip of blood on tile. And somewhere out in the frozen woods, Ethan Cole hadn't returned. Night of the snowstorm and the cry that didn't belong to the wind. Winter pressed down on Anchorage, Alaska, thick and breath-stealing beneath a sky bruised by swirling clouds. Ethan Cole moved through the tree line with the quiet precision of a man who had lived too long in the company of danger. At 40, he carried the rugged history of a Navy SEAL across every sharp angle of his face. Square jaw lined with a trimmed beard streaked with gray, a slightly crooked nose broken once in combat, and deep-set brown eyes that had witnessed too many endings. His navy winter coat brushed against the frozen branches, and the beanie pulled low over his brow bore a small metal pin. U.S. Army veteran, a reminder of a past that refused to let him go. His left knee, injured during a mission gone wrong overseas, made his stride uneven, but not slow. He no longer chased wars, but he still chased the truth. Shadow walked slightly ahead of him, paws crunching through the snow. The 5-year-old German shepherd was a perfect specimen of discipline and power. Black and tan coat, amber eyes sharp as broken glass, ears erect and alert at every sound. The dog wore a black tactical harness marked with white letters. Service dog, do not pet. Shadow wasn't the kind of dog anyone could distract. Not anymore. He had watched Ethan lose a brother-in-arms years before, and since that day, he guarded him with the kind of devotion only battlefield loyalty could shape. Ethan paused when Shadow stopped abruptly, muscles tensing under his thick coat. "What is it, boy?" he whispered. A sound answered him, thin, fragile, barely a thread of existence. A child's cry. Ethan's heart kicked painfully inside his chest. It had been years since any cry had the power to crack his armor, but this pierced straight through. Shadow bolted toward the noise without waiting for a command. Ethan chased after him, limping through the drifts, breath forming white ghosts in the air. The two broke through a cluster of frosted spruce trees and froze. A little girl, no more than 7, lay crumpled beside a narrow creek. Her blonde hair was tangled with ice. Her skin, pale as winter glass, trembled violently beneath a torn white sweater. One sneaker was missing, and blood seeped through the wool fabric at her side, staining the snow in an expanding halo. She looked like something the forest had tried to swallow. Ethan dropped to his knees. "Sweetheart, can you hear me?" Her lips parted, but the sound died before it escaped. Her eyes fluttered, unfocused, drifting in and out of consciousness. Shadow circled her, nose brushing her cheek gently, letting out a low whine Ethan had only heard once, when his teammate died in his arms during extraction. Ethan scanned the ground, drag marks in the snow, footprints too large to be hers. Someone had taken her. Someone had run. Someone might still be here. The bang of a rifle cracked the air. Ethan didn't hesitate. Years of training snapped into command. "Down!" he barked, though Shadow was already lowering himself, shielding the girl with his body. Another shot tore through a nearby tree trunk. Bark exploded like splinters of bone. The enemy was close, hunting them. Ethan's pulse hammered with a cold, controlled fury. He remembered the mission overseas that had cost his best friend's life, the ambush that left him dragging himself and Shadow across a ravine. He would not repeat that failure, not with a child's life hanging in the balance. He touched Shadow's head, fingers trembling slightly. "Listen to me," he whispered, leaning close. "Get her out. Take her to the hospital. You know the route. You can do this." Shadow stared at him, eyes burning with the discipline of a soldier and the tenderness of a guardian. Then Ethan said the words he had never spoken outside the battlefield. Go, protect her, don't look back. Shadow knelt, letting the limp girl slide onto his back. He rose slowly, adjusting his stance so she wouldn't fall. Blood dripped from her injuries onto his dark fur, but he did not flinch. Ethan stood and fired toward the shadows of the forest, drawing the gunman away. The night filled with echoes of combat, shouts, breaking branches, the crack of metal against metal, and Shadow ran. Snow lashed his face. His breath came in sharp bursts. His paws split open against ice and gravel, leaving a trail of red behind him. But he didn't stop. Not for the pain. Not for the cold slicing his lungs. Not for the dark figure he thought he saw stalking the trees behind him. The girl's small hand slid weakly against his neck. Shadow pressed forward faster, heart pounding with a desperate promise. Save her. Save her. Save her. He broke through the last line of trees, stumbling onto the road leading into Anchorage. The blizzard had turned the world into a white blur, and Shadow swayed, legs buckling. A distant glow pierced the storm, the neon lights of Alaska Regional Hospital flickering through the snowfall like a fragile beacon. Shadow blinked hard, fighting the dark edges creeping into his vision. His body trembled, the blood loss catching up. He lowered his head and forced one more step, and another. Then he stumbled, legs splaying. The girl on his back shifted limply. Shadow tried again, one paw pressing into the snow. One step. Another. The hospital lights drifted further, blurred by tears and exhaustion. No one knew if he would reach the doors in time. No one knew if Ethan was still alive behind the wall of gunfire, and the storm swallowed everything but the faint outline of a wounded dog carrying a dying child towards salvation. When the automatic doors opened and the entire hospital held its breath, the storm had not yet lifted from Anchorage, and the morning cold clung to the hospital walls like a second layer of frost. Inside the Alaska Regional Hospital Emergency Department, the fluorescent lights hummed faintly above nurses rushing through their shift change, their breaths still visible after walking in from the snow-smothered parking lot. Then the doors slid open, not with urgency, not with the usual rush of paramedics, but with a strange, heavy silence, as if the building itself paused to inhale. Shadow staggered through the entrance, his thick coat drenched, water dripping from each strand of fur. His paws, cracked and bleeding, left smudges of red against the polished floor. Balanced across his back like a fragile bundle was the unconscious girl. Her blonde hair, tangled and frozen at the ends, clung to his neck. Her small face, pale and expressionless, bounced softly with each uneven step he took. Gasps broke the silence, first from a receptionist, then from two orderlies pushing a supply cart. What in God's name? Shadow swayed, his vision blurred, but he kept moving, each breath forced through gritted will, his eyes locked on the nearest human who might save the child. A nurse rushed forward before anyone else reacted. Megan Harris, 32, short and slender with warm brown skin and dark curls tied into a low bun, dropped everything in her hands. Megan was known around the hospital for her gentle voice and iron composure, qualities forged from raising her two younger siblings alone after her parents died in a car crash. But nothing in her years of crisis work prepared her for the sight of a war-trained German shepherd collapsing beneath the weight of a dying child. "Oh God, somebody get a gurney!" she yelled, sliding her arms beneath the girl, lifting her carefully but urgently. The moment her touch left his back, Shadow's legs buckled. He collapsed on his side, chest heaving violently, claws scraping weakly at the floor, as if trying to stand again. "Easy, boy," Megan whispered, her voice instinctively softening, as if she were speaking to a wounded soldier. "You did it. She's safe now." But Shadow didn't look at Megan. Even as he lay trembling, even as pain seared through his limbs, his amber eyes remained fixed on the girl being carried away. Two doctors appeared from the trauma bay. One of them, Dr. Leonard Farrow, was a tall man in his early 50s, with silver hair combed neatly back, a broad frame, and a reputation for being brusque but brilliant. His harsh tone had driven more than one intern to tears, but it was born from decades working in war-torn regions as an emergency relief physician. He had seen enough tragedy to know that hesitation killed. "What happened to her?" Farrow demanded. "She came in on a dog," Megan answered breathlessly. Farrow blinked. "A what?" Said. "She came in on a dog." Farrow stared at her, as though she had spoken in a foreign language. Then the girl's bloody shirt caught his eye, and all confusion vanished. "Prep or two," he barked. "Severe hypothermia, possible internal bleed. Move!" He strode away, shouting orders. Nurses surged forward, wheels squealed against linoleum, and the trauma bay swallowed the little girl whole, leaving Shadow alone in the hallway. Megan crouched beside him, one knee on the cold tile. Up close, she could see every detail: the gash on his shoulder, the deep scrape on his flank, the way his paw pads had been worn raw. She reached out slowly, letting him see her hand before touching his fur. "You're hurting too, aren't you?" she murmured. Shadow didn't move his head, but his tail brushed weakly against the floor. A small sound, half whine, half breath, escaped him. A security guard approached cautiously. Tom Reddick, a tall man in his early 40s, with a salt-and-pepper mustache, and the tired eyes of someone who'd spent 20 years breaking up drunken brawls, cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we can't have an animal loose in—" Megan cut him a sharp look. "He's not going anywhere. He stays." Tom hesitated. He wasn't heartless, he just followed rules, but something about the way the dog's eyes clung to the closed trauma doors softened him. He nodded slowly and stepped back. Shadow, expending what little strength he had, dragged himself forward until his side pressed against the base of the trauma room door. He lowered his head to the floor, ears perked toward every faint sound on the other side. A monitor beeped. Shadow's body tensed. Another beep. He whimpered low, as if begging the machines to stay steady. It was a sound that made several nurses pause behind the glass, but no one dared disturb him. Outside, the blizzard howled, rattling the windows. Inside, the hallway settled into a strange stillness, its heart beating behind a closed trauma door. And somewhere miles away in the forest, under the weight of falling snow and silence, Ethan Cole still had not been found. Alive or dead, no one knew. Truth in the woods and the hunt for the kidnapper. Dew still fell over Anchorage in slow, heavy flakes, turning the early afternoon into a muted gray landscape. Inside Alaska Regional Hospital, the automatic doors slid open to admit a man whose presence filled the cold lobby with a sharp, commanding tension. Sheriff Daniel McGraw stepped inside, stomping snow from his boots. In his mid-40s, tall and broad-shouldered, he carried the hardened look of someone who had spent decades staring into the worst of humanity. A thick ginger-brown beard framed his square jaw, flecked with early grays. His deep-set hazel eyes missed nothing, not the blood streaks on the floor, not the way nurses whispered in tight circles, not even the exhaustion in Megan Harris's posture as she stepped forward to meet him. Daniel's father had been a state trooper killed during a hostage standoff when Daniel was just 14, and that loss had forged a quiet, relentless fire in him. He pursued the truth like something owed. Megan briefed him quickly. Shadow's dramatic entrance, the child's condition, the dog refusing to leave the trauma bay door. Daniel listened with his arms crossed, brows knotted, until Megan handed him the small metal cylinder they had scanned minutes earlier. "It's a military microchip," Megan said softly. "Registered to Ethan Cole." Daniel's head lifted sharply. "Ethan Cole? The Navy SEAL? You know him?" Megan asked. "Only by reputation," Daniel's voice lowered. "3 tours. Disappeared after the last one. Folks say he came back different. Quiet. Keeps to himself." Megan nodded. "His dog saved that girl." Daniel turned his gaze toward the hallway where Shadow lay curled near the trauma doors. The German shepherd lifted his head when the sheriff's boots approached, amber eyes sharp even through exhaustion. Daniel crouched down, meeting the dog's stare. "You got her out alive," he murmured. "Now we have to finish the job." Shadow didn't blink, didn't move, just watched him, steady, unbroken, unafraid. Daniel rose. "I need a team in the woods within 15 minutes. The forest swallowed sound the moment they crossed the tree line. 3 members of the sheriff's department accompanied Daniel. Deputy Carl Hughes, a thin blonde man in his late 20s with a nervous energy but a good heart. Deputy Rena Kessler, a 35-year-old woman with sharp cheekbones, olive skin, and a no-nonsense attitude shaped by 10 years working domestic violence cases. And Sergeant Wayne Cutter, a burly man with a shaved head and a permanent scowl, though he was known for a surprising gentleness with children. The team trudged through knee-deep powder, following the trail Shadow had carved hours earlier. Drops of blood, some frozen, some freshly melted by rising temperature, marked the way like punctured footprints. The woods felt suffocatingly still. Carl shivered. "Feels like something's watching us." "It's the cold playing tricks on you," Wayne muttered, though his hand hovered at too close to his holster to be convincing. Half a mile in, Daniel halted them with a raised fist. Tracks, drag marks, and there, spent shell casings buried halfway in the snow. He knelt, brushing frost aside. 9mm, close range. Rena moved ahead and stopped suddenly. Sheriff, you might want to see this. A small clearing opened between the trees, where a makeshift campsite clung to the ground like a wound. A torn blue tarp flapping weakly from a branch, a half-collapsed fire pit filled with ash and scattered debris, a broken thermos, a rope, a child's sock stiffened by ice. Daniel stared, jaw tightening. He kept her here. Rena crouched near a tree trunk. Sir, carved into the bark were 3 jagged words, no going back. Wayne swore softly under his breath. Carl stepped closer to Daniel. This guy's spiraling. The writing, it's desperate. Daniel scanned the dirt for more clues. He didn't just grab her. He planned to vanish with her. These maps, a folded sheet of paper half buried beneath a rock, caught his eye. He pulled it free. It was a detailed topographic map of Anchorage's outskirts, red circles marking dozens of potential hideouts. One route was traced in thick marker, leading from Lily's neighborhood, through the forest, then looping east toward the mountains. He was moving her, Daniel said. The dog must have intervened. Carl inspected the ground beside a fallen log. His voice trembled. Sheriff, more blood here, a lot of it. Daniel hurried over. The snow around the log was stained a deep, dried brown. Not pooled, scattered, a sign of struggle, not stillness. Then he saw something half buried nearby, a torn piece of navy fabric, Ethan's coat. Daniel swallowed hard. He was here. Rena's expression hardened. Alive? Daniel stood slowly. If he died here, the bodies would be here. The kidnapper must have dragged him, or Ethan ran. Wayne pointed toward dense brush where branches were snapped and bent. Something big moved through there, recently. Snow drifted from the trees, muffling their breaths. Daniel clenched Ethan's torn fabric in his fist. We keep going. If Ethan's alive, he's running out of time. They pushed deeper into the forest, following broken branches and faint blood trails until the sky began to dim into a muted blue twilight. The storm weakened, but the cold worsened. Finally, Rena stopped, her voice dropping. Sheriff, there's something ahead. They approached cautiously until the trees parted into a thin ravine. At the bottom lay a scattering of footprints, 2 sets. One heavy and erratic, the other staggered and lighter, as though someone was stumbling. A smear of blood streaked across a boulder, ending abruptly near a broken patch of ice. Daniel inhaled sharply. He fell. Carl scanned the ravine edge. If he went over, no body, Wayne noted. Daniel exhaled slowly, a spark of grim hope flickering in his chest. Then he crawled out, or someone took him. He looked at the darkening forest, jaw tight with renewed resolve. Ethan Cole is alive, and we're not stopping until we find him, or the man who took him. The nightmare returns to the hospital. Night wrapped itself around Anchorage like a heavy blanket of ice. The storm had slowed, but the snow still drifted down in lazy spirals, blurring the orange glow of the streetlights outside Alaska Regional Hospital. Inside, the building had settled into that strange, fragile quiet that comes after a long day of chaos. The waiting room television muttered the evening news with the volume turned low. A custodian pushed a mop down the hallway, humming under his breath. Most of the day shift had gone home, leaving the night staff to move like ghosts through fluorescent corridors. Shadow lay in the ICU hallway, directly against the door of Lily's room. The German shepherd's thick, black and tan fur was still matted with dirt and dried blood. A vet tech had managed to clean his worst wounds and wrap his paws with gauze, but there had been no way to make him leave. Every time someone tried to coax him toward a crate, Shadow dug his claws into the tile and stared at Lily's door with a stubborn, burning focus. Now, in the thin hours after midnight, his breathing had settled into a slow, steady rhythm. His head rested on his front paws, ears relaxed, but not asleep. Shadow never truly slept when someone he'd chosen to protect was still in danger. Across from him, Megan Harris sat slumped in a plastic chair, a paper cup of coffee cooling in her hands. Her dark curls had come loose from their bun, forming a frizzy halo around her tired face. She had changed into a clean pair of scrubs, but faint brown stains still clung to her wrists, a reminder of how much blood they'd nearly lost today. She glanced at the monitors through the glass wall of Lily's room. The little girl lay small and still beneath a thin blanket, a nasal cannula feeding her oxygen, IV lines taped to her bruised arms. Her blonde hair had been gently combed back by one of the pediatric nurses, but the purple marks along her jaw and neck betrayed the violence that had tried to erase her. "Hang in there, sweetheart," Megan whispered. "You made it this far. Don't you dare give up now." Shadow's ear flicked at the sound of her voice, but his eyes never left the door. Downstairs, the automatic doors slid open again, this time very quietly. The man who stepped in looked like he belonged there. He wore light blue hospital scrubs, white sneakers, and a navy jacket zipped halfway up. A standard-eyed badge clipped to his pocket flashed a hospital logo and a name, Dr. Tyler Nash. His hair was cut short, his face clean-shaven, his features average enough that no one's gaze lingered on him. Average was what he counted on. Under the fluorescent light, though, the little tells were there. The way his eyes never softened when they passed another human being. The faint white scar along his jaw that tugged when he clenched it. The way his hands stayed too still at his sides, belying the tension coiled under his skin. His real name was Roy Dalton, 38, a man whose life had unraveled years ago after too many lost jobs, too many bottles drained to the bottom, too many nights spent blaming everyone but himself. When Lily's mother had finally thrown him out, something had snapped. He decided if he couldn't own a life, he would control one. Lily's. Roy walked down the corridor like he knew where he was going. He did. He had studied the hospital blueprints for hours online, traced the routes on a cheap motel notepad, muttering to himself about blind spots and camera angles. He had stolen the badge from a sleeping resident in a break room at another facility 2 days earlier. Planning gave him comfort. Planning made him feel like he was smarter than the rest of them. Tonight, he told himself, he would fix what the dog had ruined. On the 3rd floor, the elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Roy stepped into the ICU hallway and paused for half a heartbeat. At the far end, he spotted his goal, Lily's room, glowing pale through the glass. What he did not expect was the dark shape on the floor. Shadow's head lifted. For a moment, the world shrank to a single thread of scent, sharp, sour, oily, with old sweat and fear. Shadow's lips pulled back an inch, revealing the edge of his teeth. His body tensed, the memory snapping into place. The forest, the shouting, the crack of a branch, the smell of this same man's rage beating through the air. Megan noticed the dog first. "Hey, what is it, boy?" she murmured. Shadow rose slowly, an almost mechanical movement. His paws protested beneath the bandages, but he ignored the pain. His ears angled forward, his gaze locked on Roy. The man's eyes flicked to the dog and then away, too quickly. He kept walking, 5 steps, 7, 10. He reached for the ICU door handle. Shadow growled. It was a low, guttural rumble that made Megan's skin prickle. She stood up, coffee forgotten, gaze darting between the dog and the man at the door. "Sir," she called, "can I help you?" Roy didn't turn. "Checking on a patient," he said flatly, voice muffled slightly by the surgical mask he'd slipped on downstairs. "Dr. Nash, I was paged." Megan frowned. She didn't recognize the name, but float doctors rotated often on night shifts. Still, something about his back, too rigid, too ready, made unease crawl up her spine. Shadow took 3 deliberate steps forward. Roy's hand tightened around the object hidden in his pocket, a folding knife, already unlocked. His plan had been simple. In, 1 quick move, silence the girl, out. Let the storm and the chaos swallow the rest. He opened the door. The soft hiss of the seal breaking was somehow louder than the storm outside. Lily shifted in her bed at the gust of cooler air. Her lashes fluttered, just a little. Roy stepped through the doorway, and Shadow launched. The dog moved like a bolt of black lightning. His wounds tore open as he pushed off the tile, but every muscle drove him forward. Megan barely had time to gasp as a 70-pound wall of fur and muscle slammed into Roy's side, knocking him away from the bed. Roy stumbled into the wall, the knife flashing into view as his arm jerked up. Shadow hit his arm first. Teeth sank into flesh. Roy screamed, an animal sound torn from somewhere deep and ugly. He swung wildly, the knife grazing Shadow's ribs, slicing through fur and skin. Hot pain shot through the dog's side, but he refused to let go. Megan hit the red emergency button on the wall, heart jackhammering in her chest. "Security to ICU now! He's got a weapon!" Alarm shrieked through the hallway. Outside, Lily's heart monitor spiked in frantic beeps. Roy staggered backward, dragging Shadow with him into the doorway. Blood spattered across the glass. He tried to pry the dog's geese off his arm, punching at his head, kicking at his wounded side. Shadow's vision blurred at the edges, but he held on, every instinct screaming one word: protect, protect, protect. Two nurses at the far end of the hall froze for a second, then spun to run, shouting for help. The elevator doors burst open. Sheriff Daniel McGraw emerged with Sergeant Wayne Cutter at his shoulder, both men already drawing their weapons. They'd just returned from the forest, faces drawn, boots still dusted with snow, and walked straight into the echo of alarms. "Drop the knife!" Daniel roared, his voice ricocheting off the walls. Roy jerked his head toward them, eyes wild. For one split second, Daniel saw everything: rage, fear, the cornered desperation of a man who knew his world was collapsing. Roy tightened his grip on the knife, drawing his arm back. Shadow adjusted his weight, shifting his bite just enough to wrench the man's arm sideways. The blade clattered to the floor. Wayne lunged, tackling Roy from behind. Daniel grabbed his other arm, forcing him down. It took both men to pin him, knees digging into the tile, handcuffs snapping closed with a final metallic click. The hallway erupted into motion, nurses rushing, monitors chiming, voices overlapping. In the middle of it all, Shadow finally let go. The German shepherd stumbled backward, leaving a smear of blood where his paws dragged. His chest heaved. The cut along his ribs leaked crimson through his fur. He turned his head slowly toward Lily's bed. Inside the room, the little girl sat halfway up, eyes wide, clutching the bed rail with both hands. Tears streamed down her bruised cheeks. "Shadow," she whispered, voice cracking. He took one unsteady step toward her, another. His legs trembled. The world narrowed to her face, her small hand reaching out toward the glass, the sound of her voice calling him back from the dark. Then his front legs gave out. Shadow collapsed heavily onto the floor, breath shuddering, the overhead lights blurring into a halo of white, and for a terrible, suspended moment, no one in the ICU knew if the dog who had carried a child through a storm would survive the nightmare that had followed them into the hospital. Shadow's battle to live, and the family that finds him. The chaos of the ICU hallway slowly thinned, leaving behind only the echo of alarms and the coppery scent of blood. Officers dragged Roy Dalton away in handcuffs, his curses drowned beneath the shuffle of boots and the slap of the closing elevator doors. Nurses whispered urgently to each other. Monitors beeped in uneven rhythms. The world felt cracked open, but in the center of that fractured scene lay Shadow. The German shepherd's body trembled, his breath shallow and uneven. The cut along his ribs leaked steadily, pooling beneath him. His paws twitched as if still trying to move toward Lily's room. His ears drooped, worn by exhaustion and pain. Megan Harris dropped to her knees beside him, both hands hovering shakily over his fur. "Oh no, 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 stay with me," she whispered, voice breaking. The calm that usually anchored her in crisis trembled now. "You did enough. Just hold on a little longer." Daniel McGraw knelt on the other side of the dog, face drawn with grim concern. His rugged features, lined by years of loss and responsibility, softened as he looked down at the wounded animal. "Call the on-duty vet tech again," he ordered. "Now, tell her it's life or death." Sergeant Wayne Cutter had already radioed for a surgical team. Sweat collected along his bald scalp, despite the cold draft sweeping the hallway. "He saved that little girl," Wayne muttered, almost to himself. "Damn hero deserves the best we've got." Inside the ICU room, Lily pressed her palm against the glass, tears streaking down her face. She was so small against the hospital bed, her blonde hair disheveled, her eyes wide with fear. "Shadow?" she whispered, voice muffled by the glass. "Please don't go." Shadow lifted his head at her voice, barely, and his tail thumped once, slow and weak, against the floor. That was all he had left. Moments later, the emergency veterinary team hurried in. At the front was Dr. Nora Ellsworth, a petite woman in her late 40s with sharp gray eyes and short auburn hair tucked behind her ears. Her skin was pale, almost translucent under the harsh lights, and her expression carried the practiced calm of someone accustomed to rushing into disaster. She knelt beside Shadow, hands moving with clinical precision. "Laceration to the ribcage, possible puncture, severe blood loss," she murmured to her assistant, a young veterinary intern with freckles and shaky hands named Alice Brent. Just 24 and fresh out of school. Alice swallowed hard. Can he make it? Dr. Ellsworth didn't answer immediately. She glanced at Shadow's half-open eyes, noting the way he never looked away from Lily's room. We don't let animals like this die without a fight, she finally said. Prep the surgical ward. We're operating now. They lifted Shadow onto a rolling stretcher, his head lolled to the side. Lily let out a sob as they wheeled him away. Wait! She cried, voice cracking. Don't take him! Please! Megan hurried to her, gathering the trembling girl into her arms. Sweetheart, they're helping him, she whispered, brushing a tear-soaked strand of hair from Lily's cheek. He fought for you. Now they fight for him. Lily buried her face into Megan's shoulder. I don't want him to die. Megan's throat tightened. Neither do I. The surgical ward was colder than the rest of the hospital. Dr. Ellsworth worked with the intensity of someone refusing to surrender. Wayne and Daniel stood outside behind the glass, watching the rapid flurry of hands moving over Shadow's body. Tubes, clamps, threads, bright surgical lights cutting through the gloom. Inside, Alice monitored Shadow's vitals, her lip trembling as she whispered encouragement to the unconscious dog. You're the bravest boy I've ever seen. Just keep going. Please keep going. For hours, the battle raged. Shadow hovered in that soft, thin space between life and loss. His breathing a fragile rhythm, his heartbeat stubborn but irregular. Memories flickered in his dreaming mind. Ethan's steady hand, the snowstorm, Lily's trembling voice, Ethan ordering him to run. Protect, protect, protect. He wasn't done. Not yet. Dr. Ellsworth tied the final suture and exhaled sharply. Get fluids running. He's not out of the woods, but he has a chance. Wayne placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. He's one hell of a dog. Daniel nodded. He's a soldier. By morning, the storm had mostly cleared, painting Anchorage in pale silver sunlight. Lily slept on a chair beside Shadow's recovery crate, wrapped in a blanket. Her breathing was even now, her small hand resting through the bars so her fingers could touch Shadow's paw. Shadow didn't move, but his chest rose and fell, steady and strong. Megan stood nearby, exhaustion etched across her features, but softened by quiet relief. He made it, she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. He really made it. A soft knock echoed from the doorway. Daniel turned to see a man leaning against the frame, shoulders slumped, face bruised, and clothes torn. His beard was scruffier now, his navy coat ripped at the sleeve, but his eyes, those deep brown eyes, held the same fierce steadiness as before. Ethan Cole, alive, barely standing, but alive. He limped into the room, favoring his injured knee. His face was hollow with fatigue, dusted with dried blood, and one of his knuckles was swollen, clear signs of a brutal fight in the woods before he escaped. When his gaze fell on Shadow, something inside him broke open. He knelt beside the crate, breath hitching. Hey, partner, he whispered, voice cracking. You did it. Shadow's ear twitched. One slow movement. Ethan laughed under his breath, a broken, grateful sound, and pressed his forehead gently to the bars. Thank you for bringing her home. Lily stirred awake, blinking sleep from her swollen eyes. Shadow? Then she saw Ethan. You're Shadow's person? She asked timidly. Ethan looked at her, his expression softening. I'm his teammate, he corrected gently, but today, I think he belongs to you too. Lily smiled through tears. Shadow's tail thumped once, weak but full of meaning. The battle was over, and the family that would save each other, time and time again, had finally found its beginning. Sometimes, miracles don't arrive with thunder or light. Sometimes, they come on 4 tired legs, carrying a child through the darkest storm of her life. In a world full of fear, loss, and uncertainty, moments like this remind us that God still works quietly among us, through courage, through loyalty, and through the unexpected heroes he places in our path. Just as he guided Shadow through the blizzard, he guides us too. Through every hardship, every long night, every battle we think we cannot survive. And when we feel alone, he often sends someone, or something, to carry us when we can't walk on our own. So, tonight, may this story remind you that God's love still moves in ways we cannot always see, and that even in the coldest winter, his light finds a way through. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope. Leave a comment below to tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories of faith, courage, and compassion. May God bless you, protect your family, and bring warmth to every cold place in your life. Amen.